What's up, guys? This is Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down some big news that just came out from the Supreme Court that could be causing more volatility for the markets. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. So, you have this big news that just came out. The Supreme Court has stricken down most of President Trump's tariffs. This is a big blow for the Trump administration, according to what President Trump had said yesterday. So, what's going on? Let's talk about this. So, the news just came out that the Supreme Court has ruled that President Trump exceeded his authority when imposing the sweeping tariffs using a law that was reserved for national emergencies instead. The justices were divided in a 6-3 vote. They held that President Trump's approach to the tariffs entering the U.S. Was not permitted under a 1977 law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. So, what does this mean? Well, according to the Chief Justice John Roberts, he was once again joined by three liberal justices and two fellow conservatives. And he mentioned that the president asserts the extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs on unlimited amount, duration, and scope. But he said that the Trump administration points to no statute in which Congress has previously said that the language in the IEEPA could apply to tariffs, he added. In such, they hold that the IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose the tariffs. So that's what they're saying. Using that act, they cannot impose the tariffs just like that. What this means is that the decision does not affect all of President Trump's tariffs. There's going to be tariffs that are going to remain on steel and aluminum using different laws. However, it will upend his tariffs into two categories. One is country by country or the reciprocal tariffs, which range from 34% for China to a 10% baseline for the rest of the world. And the other is a 25% tariff that Trump imposed on some goods on Canada, China, and Mexico. So, what this tells us is that according to the Constitution, according to the Supreme Court, the power to set tariffs is assigned to Congress. Trump used the IEEPA, which does not specifically mention tariffs, but allows the president to regulate imports and exports when he deems that there is an emergency to do so. So that's some important news. So what this means is that when President Trump imposes his tariffs, okay, he has to not necessarily use the IEEPA to do that. And the tariffs that he imposed using that are not going to be in effect. As of the middle of December, the IEEPA tariffs had raised about $130 billion. And now we're going to have to see what happens now that the Supreme Court is striking them down. Will the money be refunded? I think there's still more answers to come out. But as of right now, these tariffs will be striking down. It's not all tariffs. Once again, the steel and aluminum tariffs will remain, but most of President Trump's tariffs will be striking down because of this decision by the Supreme Court. Now, why is this important? Why is the market kind of like bouncing as a result of this news? Well, here's the thing. When President Trump announces new tariffs, typically the market gets an initial sell off because the tariffs do have some negative consequences. They, once again, can affect the relationship between the US and other countries. They could cause higher inflation, and they could also contract our GDP, according to many studies I've talked about on this channel. However, President Trump argues that the tariffs are worth it because they're going to raise revenue, and that revenue could be reinvested into the US and offset a lot of the pain. That's the main idea. It's also because of fairness, as President Trump has said that the US has been screwed over by different countries. He claims that, so he wants to impose these high tariffs. So my point is that typically when we hear about new tariffs, we typically see the market sell off. Typically, that's what happens because the market is going to have to kind of like price in the more higher expenses for companies, the higher possible inflation, the effects on the US economy, and the list goes on. Now, for the long term, of course, the market will be fine as it typically is. But that's what you have to remember. So now it is the opposite. Instead of there being more tariffs that cause the market to initially sell off, it's the opposite. The stock market is now seeing the tariffs being striking down, and the market is going to initially like that news because, once again, this could improve profit margins for companies. It could also kind of like alleviate some of the negative effects that the tariffs had caused, at least temporarily. Of course, even if there are negative consequences, there's going to be positive consequences from the increases in the governmental revenue that can be reinvested into the US. So I want to be very unbiased when saying that. But of course, like I said before, As of right now, most of the tariffs are going to be striking down, and the market likes this news. The market is bouncing. And I think that there's a good chance the market tries to continue to push next week if we hold these key levels. Now, some more news came out just real quick. Even though the GDP numbers were kind of weak, inflation was a bit elevated, we still had the PMI data, which was all very close to expectations. New home sales were not bad, and the Michigan data was also decent. And once again, this news involving the Supreme Court is helping the market bounce. We're getting a market wide bounce, which is benefiting Tesla, but Tesla will still be affected by the steel and aluminum tariffs. But the global tariffs, a lot of them are going to be once again striking down, and that could benefit Tesla to a small extent, which is why it's partially bouncing, at least for now. So for Tesla, what you'll see is that there is the possibility of a left shoulder, kind of like a head here, and a right shoulder. And if Tesla could try to get back above 413, we're looking for 416.8 and eventually 420 as our target. Now, if Tesla ends up losing the 406 area, we could be dipping to the low 400s. And if that fails us, we could be looking for a bigger move down. But as of right now, we're holding support. We're looking for an attempt to push for 413. If that breaks, I think 416.8 is a stronger possibility. This inverse head and shoulders could be formed, and I think there's a good chance we try to push higher if we break 413. However, there's no confirmation of a break yet, and for the most part, Tesla's still technically trading sideways like this. So it may continue to chop around for some time before it attempts to break out for 416 and 420. So we'll see how it goes. On top of this, we're going to see if the wicks essentially form and they try to push us for 413 to 416 plus. So we'll see how it goes. On the SPY chart, I think the same thing is essentially going on. We're looking a bit more bullish. I want to see us not lose 685 by close. If we hold that, SPY could also look for an attempt to push like this. This kind of looks like kind of like a cup and handle. And as long as we don't lose 685, we could continue to push for 688 and eventually the 690s for a melt up. Same thing with the QQQ. I don't want to see the QQQ essentially lose 600 and also 605. I want to see us hold at least 605 by close. If we do, we could be looking for 608. And then eventually, if we break that, I think 613 becomes a possibility for another melt up. With SPY and the QQQ possibly pushing, that could benefit Tesla. I like that Tesla's kind of like forming a triple bottom, and that could help Tesla bounce as well if we break 413. Eventually, 416 to 420 are possibilities, so give this the time it needs. For other tickers out there, we have the IWM. We're forming these wicks right here. If we end up losing 262, we're looking for a dump. If we break 265, we're looking for a bounce. Break 265, and I think this could be pushing even higher. So I think there's a chance we attempt to rebound. Once again, SPY is trying to push. Also, when it comes to the tariffs, I think there's still more news to come out about them. This news just came out 20 minutes ago. So I think there's going to be more details about what's going to happen with different companies. Will they have to refund the tariffs? I think we're still waiting for news like that. I just want to give you guys the first piece of news, at least for now, just to let you guys know what's happening. ES is bouncing a bit. I want to see if we could reclaim 6,900. If we do, we're going to easily push for close to all-time highs. If we can't reclaim that level, I don't want to see us lose 68.50 at the same time, but overall, there's potential to bounce on ES. We're somewhat green. NQ is trying to bounce inverse head and shoulders like pattern. I want to see us break 25,000 to continue. So far, this news is having a profound effect, and we might see futures bounce. Bitcoin has a double bottom. We held 65,000, could be looking for a push for 67,500 and then 68,000 plus. If that breaks, 70,000 is possible. Tesla's looking for 413, then eventually 416 and 420 is our targets. Nvidia is bouncing inverse head and shoulders like pattern. It's benefiting from this news. As long as we don't lose 185, I think 190 and 192 are possibilities. Apple's looking pretty good, looking for essentially 263 and 265 as our targets. Netflix is testing 77.77 as resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for 80 as our next target. On Palantir, I want to see us reclaim 134 to bounce higher for 138. AMD is looking a bit more bullish. I don't want to see us lose 200. We might slowly uptrend for 203, then 205, but it's very slow. Coinbase is looking bullish, hold above 169. Then we're looking for 175 and 180 as our targets. On Amazon, we're looking bullish as a result of the tariff news, looking for 211 as our targets. If that breaks, we could be looking for 215, then eventually the gap to fill from earnings. Meta is looking a bit more bullish, looking for essentially 659, then eventually 670. Google's looking for a bounce back up for 316, then eventually 322. And Microsoft is going to be looking for a push to 400. If that breaks, we're looking for 402. Also, notice that the VIX is rejecting. I mentioned that typically when the VIX hits the 20s, we push and reject, push and reject, push and reject. And in this case, we're looking for 19.23 if that fails us. We're looking for 18.8 and 17.7 as our targets, as SPY is pushing higher, it's causing the VIX to drop. The QQQ and SPY have the potential to push a lot higher. And then this is helping Tesla. It's almost green now, looking for 413, 416, and then 420 is our targets. I think Tesla's looking more bullish to me. But it's not super fast. It's a slow buy up, so give it some time. With that being said, I thank you for listening. We'll see if more updates come out involving the tariffs. But for now, this is more bullish news. Have a good day, guys, and peace out.